I'm Kimberly Bush, your online legal correspondent for Legality. Today, we're in Kansas City, Missouri at the Sater Law Firm, speaking with Neil Sater. Neil practices bankruptcy and business bankruptcy law. Today, he's going to talk to us about an important subject that's really troubling a lot of people, student loans. He's going to explain to us what someone can do if they're having trouble paying their student loans. Welcome, Neil, to our show.
Kimberly, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Neil, for talking to me. So, how big a problem are student loans?
Student loans are becoming an even more serious problem than credit card debt today. I think some recent studies show that, in fact, there are higher levels of student loan debt right now in our society, in America, than there are credit card debts. So it's a very serious issue, not only for young people, but also for older people that may have guaranteed student loans as well.
Yeah, I would think not only parents, but even grandparents sometimes co-sign on these loans.
Oftentimes it can be relatives, it could be siblings, parents, grandparents. It's really a very, very predominant problem right now and just getting worse, oftentimes because of the tremendous interest rates that are involved.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that people, 10 years out of school, 20 years out of school, they might still be paying their loans. And now they have mortgages, they have families to support. What does someone do if they really get in over their heads with all those bills?
Well, if you're talking about what they can do about their student loan debts, one problem that people have is that they get deferments on these student loans, which elongates and extends the period of time that it's going to take for them to pay them off. But one of the really damaging impacts also is that because of the interest rates, the amount of debt compounds and becomes even higher. So
do they ever pay them off?
Well, we're going to find out whether people actually do pay them off or not in the coming years. And the laws have changed over time, too. When I first started practicing law, student loans were dischargeable if they were a certain length of time, if they were more than 5 years old. So
really?
The laws have changed on it, and I wouldn't be surprised if the laws continue to change on it, too.
What year did the law change?
I think the law first changed back in 1996.
Okay.
And prior to that time, there was student loans were dischargeable in bankruptcy. I think there was only a short few-year period of time. I think back in 1996, they extended it to at least be 5 years old before it was discharged. And now, of course, the laws have become even more difficult. Right. And so most people today think that student loans aren't dischargeable at all.
That's what I've heard. I think that, if you filed bankruptcy, if that's what you have to do, you wouldn't even be able to get them discharged even then, right?
Well, generally speaking, that is the case. But there are hardship discharges available.
Okay.
And many people, especially with these large balances, and well into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, we're finding are eligible for hardship discharges in bankruptcy of those student loan debts.
So what defines a hardship discharge?
A hardship discharge it's really something that is defined by the court and by the judge. And there are different factors and different facts that judges and courts look at depending on where you live, depending on which court you're in. But what I tell people, the main things to look at is it depends on whether you are eligible for a hardship discharge will depend on how much you owe. If you owe hundreds of thousands of dollars and the amount of your monthly payment is more than your income, that's one good sign that you may be eligible for a hardship discharge.
Okay.
Your age is very important. If you are close to retiring, if you're close to having a limited income or a fixed income, that would make it very difficult for you to pay off a large growing amount of student loan debt. That too can be very important in determining whether you qualify for a hardship discharge. And last, health is also a very important issue. If you are unable to work or if you have some serious impediments to being able to work, that too can be a very important factor in whether or not you would qualify for a hardship discharge.
Okay. Because I would imagine if you have a job, you're paying down these loans, and you have a medical emergency, and it puts you out of work, either temporarily or for, on a permanent basis. Would that be something that might be a hardship that would qualify?
Absolutely. Well, what I would tell you is that there are some interim measures that people can take. There are some repayment plans, some modification plans that the federal government has instituted and set up that you may be able to qualify for if you're in a temporary situation where you may have, be unemployed or be unable to work for, a few months or a year, something like that. But if you are seriously injured or unable to work over an extended period of time, then a hardship discharge is something that you may want to look at very seriously.
Going back for a second about parents and grandparents who co-sign on these loans, do you see a lot of these cases where, if the child, just for whatever reason, he defaulted on his loans, now they're going after grandpa? What does he do in that situation?
Absolutely. And again, oftentimes the guarantors are on fixed incomes. Oftentimes, things do happen. And maybe the grandchild, for whatever reason, may have filed bankruptcy, may have gotten a discharge, may have had other problems. And in fact, the guarantor is now stuck with that debt. The same factors apply. In other words, the guarantor also may want to look at a bankruptcy or a hardship discharge if they're older, if they're on a fixed income, if their working years are few, and also depending on how much is owed.
I'm going to stop you for a second while we take a short break. If you have a question about student loans and bankruptcy, please go to saterlawfirm.com or submit your question to askthelawyer.com. We'll be right back.
The first thing that we ask any new business client to do when they come in is to bring in our packet, which has got all the information for it. The packet has a snapshot of the company and tells us everything we need to know, mainly the assets and the debts of the company. We need to know all the creditors that the company has, and we need to know what is secured and what is unsecured, because there are options for both. There's a way to get out completely of the unsecured debt, and there's a way to restructure the secured debt. The most important thing for any business owner when they come to talk to us is to bring everything that we ask in the packet to be brought, because that gives us everything we need to know, and we're going to be able to give them the best advice right at that first meeting.
Welcome back to Legality. I'm here in Kansas City, Missouri, speaking with Neil Sater of the Sater Law Firm. He's explaining to me what people might be able to do if they get in over their heads with bills and student loans in particular. So Neil, you were saying that oftentimes parents and grandparents co-sign loans for people, and then for whatever reason, maybe the loan gets defaulted, and now the parent or the grandparent might have a hardship ability to get rid of that loan. Is that true?
We have people that talk to us about those types of situations with guarantors where we end up urging them to consider either filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy or Chapter 13 bankruptcy, depending on their other debts also. But if the student loan debt that they guaranteed is taking up a majority of their monthly resources, a majority of their monthly income, and only growing because chances are the original person that signed the loan isn't making payments, then it's really something that would be wise for them to take a look at.
Do you think that sometimes people might say, I've paid my student loans for 20 years. It's not fair for someone else to get a discharge of a student loan. They should have to pay it just like everybody else. What would you say?
I understand, and the fact is that it probably is most important to realize that what's best about discharges is that they're there to both help the creditor and the debtor. Creditors, if they continue to pursue people that owe this money and that don't have it, it's really a wasted expense on their part. It's wasted resources that they're expending, and they would really be better off not expending those further resources to collect money that they're not going to collect. So it encourages them to be more responsible in their lending decisions and to maybe be a little tougher and not just lend money out to anyone and everyone. Debtors, of course, profit because most people that get in this situation, bankruptcy and hardship discharges are for people that are honest debtors that got into a situation that may not be because of their fault. Whether if they received an injury, if they're unable to work, what's the point of expecting them to be able to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars back over years if they can't? All it really does is it adds tremendous stress to their lives, to their families' lives, and if there aren't the resources to pay it, it just makes them miserable. And so the government, I think in its wiseness years ago, and bankruptcy laws have been around for centuries, and actually date back to the Bible, but that's a long story.
That. Okay.
The fact is only the most sophisticated economies in the world have bankruptcy laws because they realize that by having these laws available, it encourages lenders to be careful and to not loan money to anyone. But it also gives debtors that are honest and that make an effort to repay it, but if they can't, if there's circumstances beyond their control, it encourages them to try again, to go out and work, to try another business. It encourages people to be entrepreneurial, because if they make a mistake or if something happens beyond their circumstances and they can't pay something back, they have an opportunity to still live their lives and be productive.
Do you think, just like there was a real estate bubble in 2008, there's kind of a student loan bubble where people are just lending money out to anybody that applies, even if they don't have the ability to pay it back, or even if their, graduate degree doesn't give them the job to work and pay it back?
I think there are cycles, and I think that the idea of lending students money to be able to educate themselves and be able to improve themselves is a wonderful idea. And so many people in our society have benefited from that.
Yeah.
But there has been a cost, and it may have gone a little too far. And the question of whether some schools, maybe some for-profit schools and some of the schools that aren't your typical universities and nonprofits, there may have been a situation where they may take advantage of people, I think, and may have been all too eager to lend money to people knowing that they couldn't easily get out of it and knowing that they would have them on the hook for years to come.
Well, these for-profit schools, they're making money off their students, which, they also give a service, but it's probably important that a person going to one of these schools really investigates the graduation rate or things like that.
I think what's really important is people that do consider those alternatives need to understand that it's a real school, and it's not something that they should just be thinking about doing and possibly giving up. No, they need to be committed to doing it. For-profit schools can be, very important to help people qualify for new jobs, give them new ideas, give them new skills that really are important in the marketplace today. But people, before they sign that paper, need to understand that they are going to be committed and they're signing a legal document, and they shouldn't, undertake that commitment if they're not prepared to be able to handle going to classes, doing homework, all the requirements that go with that.
And slowly paying the loan back over a number of years.
Well, and hopefully with the job that they've gained, and hopefully it's an improvement for them.
Yeah, it's wonderful that people can go back to school, but they have to be so careful with how much money they take out, I would imagine.
What is upsetting to me is when I see people that may have signed up for a class and then, gone for a very brief period of time, but the for-profit school has been paid for an entire semester, and the people then drop the classes, and they don't really think about the fact that they may still owe that money.
I'm going to stop you right there, Neil, because we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to explain to people a couple options they might have if they find themselves in over their head with debt, and especially student loan debt.
In a Chapter 13, it's not only called a reorganization bankruptcy, it's also called a wage earner's bankruptcy, because you do have to show that you have some source of income in order to make your plan payments. Now, we do have people who are on Social Security or retirement that are making their plan payments, and we can show that there is feasibility within their budget to make those payments. But unfortunately, if you're unemployed and you have no source of income, then the Chapter 13 is not going to be a good option for you. If you're unemployed, oftentimes the Chapter 7 is the best way to go. In a Chapter 7, there is an income limit in the most amount of money you can make and file a Chapter 7, but if you're unemployed and you have limited income, then that might be the best option for you.
Welcome back to Legality. I'm here in Kansas City, Missouri at the Sater Law Firm, speaking with Neil Sater about student loans and what to do if you find yourself struggling to pay your student loans. So Neil, let's say I'm in over my head with student loans. I can't find a job. I'm going to come to your office. What are you going to ask me?
Okay, Kimberly, what we're going to ask you is we're going to ask you what you were trained to do, what did you go to school for.
Okay.
Those are very important. If there are jobs in the field that you were trained for, that's a factor too. We're going to ask you what your age is. We're going to try to determine how much longer you have to work in the workforce.
Okay.
What the courts are looking at today is also do you have any disabilities? Are there any reasons why you can't work, or is there anything that prevents you? It could be something either with yourself, you may have an infirmity or an illness, or maybe you're taking care of a child or a spouse that prevents you from working also.
Okay.
But after that, then it's really a financial analysis.
Okay.
And we're going to take a look at, most importantly, what your current income is, what your student loan monthly obligation is, and what your other debts are too.
So we're talking bankruptcy.
Right.
I don't really know much about the different chapters of bankruptcy. What are my options if I'm looking to either get rid of my student loans or reduce them or get rid of, other debt?
Kimberly, we've talked a little bit about hardship discharges.
Yeah.
And that's where you ask a bankruptcy court to actually discharge the student loan debt obligation that you have. That's available if you file either a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13 bankruptcy.
Okay. So what's the difference between 7 and 13?
Well, quite simply, a Chapter 7 is the faster, what people used to call a straight bankruptcy, where you simply file bankruptcy, you get out of your unsecured debts, and then usually 4 or 5 months after you file, you're granted a discharge.
Is that the one where they take all your stuff?
That's the one where they generally do not take all your stuff.
Okay, 'cause I don't have anything.
People fear that, but no, it's very, very rare. But you have to consult with an attorney in the state that you live in to determine. Every state has different exemption laws. But Chapter 13 is the type of bankruptcy where people oftentimes pay through a Chapter 13 trustee their past debts over a period of time of up to 5 years or 60 months.
Okay.
But what I encourage people to think about also, and what I really find challenging about this area of law, is that sometimes we file hardship discharges for people that actually file Chapter 7 or Chapter 13, but we're able to settle the case also.
Settle the whole bankruptcy case or settle the student loans?
Settle the student loan case.
Okay.
So when you file for a hardship discharge, you're filing what's called an adversary proceeding in the bankruptcy case.
Against each other?
And so, well, it's just kind of like a lawsuit within the bankruptcy. Okay. And so you're suing the student loan company. You're saying that this loan has created a legal hardship, and you're asking the court to enter an order granting you a discharge. But oftentimes, between filing the case and the resolution, between a trial being held, it may take 18 months or more to actually get that.
And
to
you
get
say
to
it's
that
an
point.
adversary proceeding, so are they going to fight you on this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially if I recently did one case where the amount of student loan debt was something like $400,000.
Oh my goodness.
So the student loan lender that held that debt was very,
Didn't want to let that go.
They didn't want to let that go, but we ended up settling the case and were able to agree to allow a discharge of almost 3/4 of that.
Wow.
And substantially reduce the burden without ever having to go to trial. But it did take a period of time, and there were a lot of discovery proceedings and depositions were taken and things like that. But that's all part of the process for each side to get the information it needs to make a fully informed decision.
So it seems like the adversarial proceeding or the adversary proceeding within the bankruptcy filing is really like leverage for people if they need relief.
Well, if you want to try to get a hardship discharge, you have to file an adversary within the bankruptcy.
Okay.
Within the bankruptcy case. So it is leverage, but then, how far it goes, it's up to you and your attorney.
Let's say you review someone's situation and you go, I really don't think you're going to qualify for a hardship discharge. Is that something you tell a lot of people?
It is. We will review situations, and sometimes we'll tell people that maybe what you should do is apply for one of the repayment plans.
Okay.
And there are a number of different repayment plans that are available on certain loans. Usually the public loans, the Sallie Mae loans, there are repayment or modification plans that are income-based that you may be eligible for, that we encourage people to apply for or to look at and see if it would be helpful. But many loans, particularly the private student loans, aren't even eligible for those.
If you have a question about student loans and bankruptcy, please go to saterlawfirm.com or submit your question to askthelawyer.com. We'll be right back.
People are nervous when they call for bankruptcy. It's the hardest thing in the world to actually get that person to make that first initial phone call. It's very easy for people to research on the internet, but it's so important that someone actually pick up the phone and make that first call, because once you do that, then we can start to explain to you how you're going to come out of this at the end. We can explain to you what the differences are going to be, how you're going to be happier, how you're going to be more stress-free, how you're going to actually get rid of your debts. One of the things I most enjoy about my job is the fact that when clients come to me, I can make their debts go away. People end up being happy with me and with what we do. Even though it's a sad occurrence generally when someone has the need for a bankruptcy attorney, they're happy with us, and that's one of the things that I get a lot of self-satisfaction out of. If you make people's money problems go away, it makes an absolutely huge difference in their lives, a really tangible, real-life difference in their lives. And that's what we're able to do when we start to explain to you the benefits of a bankruptcy.
Welcome back to Legality. We're here in Kansas City, Missouri at the Sater Law Firm talking about student loans and bankruptcy. So Neil, you were explaining to me that bankruptcy might be an option for someone struggling to pay their student loans and how a hardship discharge is possible, but not necessarily for everyone. My question is this: if I can't get that hardship discharge, how could bankruptcy help me anyway?
Good question. Bankruptcy can be really helpful because a good bankruptcy attorney is going to look at not only your student debt situation, but also your other debts. Mm-hmm. If you are let's say you're a former student and you're a number of years out of school, and you may have car loans, you may have house loans, you may have credit cards, hospital bills, all those debts are dealt with in the bankruptcy too. When you file bankruptcy, whether it's a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 13, you have to list all of your debts, just like you have to list all of your assets.
Full disclosure.
Full disclosure. And after doing that, different debts can be treated differently. Secured debts are treated differently than unsecured debts. Some taxes, for instance, can be discharged. So there are all sorts of different things. There are all sorts of ways that bankruptcy can be helpful for more than just the student loan.
So is a student loan a secured debt or an unsecured debt?
A student loan is an unsecured debt because secured debts are the types of debts where you pledge property or collateral in exchange for a loan. Student loans, you may not be allowed to discharge them, but they're still unsecured.
I was going to say, it's still a little different though, right?
Yes, it is.
So if for whatever reason I don't get a hardship discharge, I could still kind of come out on the other end, okay?
Yes. Okay. Either if you were to apply for a hardship discharge, there's a possibility that the case may settle, and let's say the amount of your student debt was $200,000. Yeah. Maybe you will be able to settle the case with the lender for half that. Okay. And maybe some of it will be wiped out and discharged, and you would then remain paying what's left. But in addition, what other debts that you had when you filed bankruptcy will also be dealt with, and they may be able to be discharged as well. Okay. And so really setting yourself up for a better financial future.
So a lot of the burden might be able to be lifted from your shoulders, whether or not you get a hardship discharge or not.
After practicing bankruptcy law for almost 30 years, the biggest complaint I think I hear from my clients when they're through is that they wish that they had filed earlier. Because, the amount of stress that is involved prior to filing, the concern, the worry, the staying up late at night, the harassing phone calls, all that goes away. So there are a lot of benefits to filing bankruptcy that you may not realize at first. And realistically, if your attorney is properly evaluating your situation and looking at all of your entire financial picture, usually if you file, you're going to regret that you didn't do it sooner and say, why didn't I get this relief earlier so I could get started with the future and my financial my financial future even sooner.
Do you see a difference with your clients when they first come into your office from when they leave eventually as your client?
Absolutely. Absolutely. People come in, they're usually so petrified, they're worried that I'm judging them, they apologize to me. You don't need to apologize to me.
Right? No judgment.
None whatsoever. Good things can happen even if you've made some mistakes in the past.
And bad things happen to good people.
Bad things happen to good people, and the law accommodates that. That's why the law is there, because bankruptcy laws are there because those things do happen, and it gives people an opportunity to lead good lives, productive lives, and financially secure lives, even if they made some mistakes or got caught in a situation. It can also be things that may have, like a divorce or or a bad business deal that went bad. That bankruptcy can really be helpful in helping them move forward into the future.
My final question for you, Neil. How do bankruptcy attorneys get paid?
That is a really good question, and it's really not that hard.
Okay.
As I tell my clients all the time, bankruptcy is not for people with no money.
Okay.
Bankruptcy is for people that want to protect something.
Okay.
And there's a big difference.
Yeah.
If you want to protect your job and you don't want to be garnished, or if you want to protect your home, if you don't want it to be foreclosed on,
Yeah.
bankruptcy might be appropriate for you.
Okay.
If you have no money and you live under a bridge and you don't have a job and you're homeless, there's no reason, I don't care how much money you owe, there's no reason to file bankruptcy.
You do this to improve your situation for the better.
Well, bankruptcy is for people that want to protect something. They want to protect their job, they want to protect their salary, they want to protect the assets they have, and so
house.
their house. But what I tell people is oftentimes if you consult a bankruptcy lawyer, what you're going to find out is that the debts that you're going to file bankruptcy on and not pay, you can stop paying at the moment you consult with a bankruptcy attorney. There's no risk or there's no loss in stopping paying many of those debts, credit cards, other unsecured debts right away. And people oftentimes, by stopping paying certain debts and getting good advice from their attorney, can then save up pretty quickly to pay the bankruptcy fees associated with a filing.
Thank you so much, Neil. We're out of time for today, but if you'd like to know more about business bankruptcy and what your options might be, go to thesaterlawfirm.com. For more information about any topic you're interested in, visit askthelawyer.com and submit a question. You can also find us on Facebook or send us a tweet.